guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, Karen Moved Property Boundary Markers, Claims She is the Owner of My Property. This story takes place many years ago and I never knew about places like this I could tell the story. On the bright side of things, the term Karen didn't exist then, so now I have something to call her. While reading these I noticed that there are two different types of people. Ones that think their neighbors are fine until something goes wrong, and then those that have issues with their neighbor right off the bat. This situation is the later to an extreme. We weren't even fully moved in before we had problems, which was how much a Karen she was. To back up a little bit, we bought a house that needed some work done on it before we could move in. Nothing major, but we still had time at our old place, so we might as well use it to fix the new home. New kitchen tiles and a fresh coat of paint. Nothing crazy like tearing down walls or having a huge construction crew annoying everybody. One thing that we wanted in our new home was a fence, since one didn't exist yet. We didn't want to look like bad or snobby neighbors, we just wanted a fenced-in yard for the dogs. We had 2 labs at the time, and we wanted to give them a nice yard to be able to run around in. We didn't know where the exact property line was though, so we had it checked out, and they even put those little flag boundary markers telling us where it should be built. Everything was fine until Karen enters. She could have waited for us to leave, but I guess she wasn't that smart and instead tried to pull this stunt right under our noses. We were overseeing some work in the kitchen when I went outside to have a smoke. I caught Karen moving all of the property flags deeper into our property. It turns out she was trying to move them so when the fence was built she would get more land that didn't actually belong to her. I wanted to start off my new life there as a friendly neighbor, but I wasn't going to stand for anybody's shit. Me. What do you think you are doing? Karen. That is none of your business what I do at my home. Me. You can't just move property markers to where you want them to go. Karen. I am going to tell your supervisor that you are out here smoking instead of inside working. I guess she thought I was one of the people installing the tiles in the kitchen. Me. I am the new owner actually. If I catch you messing with the property markers again, then I am going to call the police. Karen. You don't know anything. I have been here for years, and I know that this is my property. I am the original owner, and this garden bed is mine. I finally notice that there is a garden bed that she is trying to maneuver the property line to get it on her side. It wasn't even like a planted garden, it was just the space that a garden clearly was at one point. I warned her again that I got the line officially marked and that was where it was. That just wasn't good enough for her, and she started up on a bunch of different rants that seemed to make less and less sense. She was trying to say that fencing in this area was illegal and then that property lines were based on land claimed and not what is in the town's information. I couldn't get a word in, and she just kept going off while trying to move another flag. I didn't let her though and told her to get the hell off of my property or I was going to call the police for her trespassing. She started a rant about how her kinds couldn't play outside anymore because of me building a fence. From what I gathered, she was letting them play in the backyard when nobody had owned it for a while. I did notice one thing while she was going on, and that was the grass near where the flags were. They didn't just place flags for boundary markers, but they had also sprayed some of the grass red. It wasn't enough to see unless you were looking for it, and it could work as the boundary line. Still, I didn't want her on my property right now and told her that she had one more chance to go inside before I called the police. At that point I wished she stayed just so I could show her that I wasn't someone who gave out empty threats. I just wasn't to deal with the hassle of this on top of moving and repairs. Instead, she walked back onto her property and told me that smoking was also illegal in this neighborhood. Okay Karen, whatever your crazy ass says. I blow a puff towards her, and that was the last thing before she went back into her house. I had a feeling that this wasn't going to be the last I heard about this, and I was right. She waited till we left to move the rest of the flags to make it seem like the border was in a totally different spot. I explained this to the people building the fence and told them to look for the red grass to see the line instead of the flags because they got moved. I was lucky enough to be there when she realized the fence was built on the property line and not where she tried to move it. She went ballistic and started telling me that I was stealing her land and she owned all of it. She threatened to come over the fence and take back what was rightfully hers. I reminded her that if she trespassed on my land, I was going to call the police on her. It helped that once we moved in she seemed to think that my dogs were vicious. Anybody who has ever known a typical lab knows that this is the opposite. Every once in a while I was still hearing her complain about the fence and how it was on her side of the property. Every time though I would give her the same answer and tell her if the town's official surveyor says that the fence is putting her property on my side then I will pay to move the fence. She will never win that, and she knows it, so that never ended up happening. Weirdly enough I never saw these so-called kids that she said had always been playing on my property. Maybe she made them up or hides them away in a minivan while she is getting a haircut and speaking to a manager. Last note is that we ended up turning that garden plot into something rather nice. Just to end the story with knowing we got our fence and now have a backyard with pretty flowers and 2 dogs running around. The next story is entitled Jogger Refused to Use the Sidewalk. I, female 20, and my fiancé live in an apartment with a horrible entrance. There are 2 ways to get into the parking lot of our apartment. One way is through a hairpin turn, and I mean literally a hairpin tight turn, off a 45 miles per hour road. The second way is to cut through a neighborhood which spits you out in the townhouse parking next to my apartment. The road is pretty narrow on the one side and the entire road is separated by a double yellow line with turn lanes to turn into different cul-de-sacs. The neighborhood also has huge sidewalks that cut through the middle of people's driveways. The road is full of blind turns and hills which makes it hard to see if there is oncoming traffic. Many people have gotten into accidents towards the entrance trying to pass walkers who aren't on the sidewalk. I was coming home from work yesterday when I turned into the neighborhood. A woman maybe late 30s was jogging in the middle of the road. Yes, smack dab in the middle, not off to the side, the middle. I slowed down behind her. I left about a car's length between me and her, and tried to find a good place to pass her since I couldn't see up the hill or around the bend in the road. The women began gesturing at me to move over before stopping altogether and banging on the hood of my car telling me to move over. At this point I was stopped in the middle of the road. She came up to my window and asked me to roll it down. When I rolled my window down she shouted at me that I needed to pass her and I can't drive behind her, because she doesn't want cars behind her. I told her I couldn't see if it was safe to pass yet, so I didn't. I also told her to just use the damn sidewalk that was less than a couple inches away from her. As this interaction went on, about 8 or 9 cars flew down the left side going well over 25. She yelled at me that I don't live here and don't understand how the neighborhood works and that nobody uses the sidewalk because it cuts through driveways. I told her if she wasn't gonna use the sidewalk then she's gonna have to deal with people slowing down behind her, or that she should step out of the road and wait till the cars pass to continue jogging. She huffed and said I was a dumb childish witch before walking over to the sidewalk and continuing her jog on the sidewalk. She also later complained about me on Nextdoor, calling me, and I quote, a dumb selfish teenager who can't drive, and saying that the neighbor needs a gate to keep trespassers out. The next story is entitled Neighbor Parks in Our Driveway. I live on a lovely quiet close with only 6 houses on. I live on the end of the close. For context, one of the houses has a driveway fitting 1 car. However, as ours is the end house, we have extra land and our driveway fits 2 cars on it. Yesterday I came back from the shops and couldn't park on our driveway as there was a random car next to my husband's. I know all our neighbors well except the woman at number 4 who moved in last month, so I knocked there first. The neighbor has a car in her driveway already, even though she doesn't drive. I ask her if she knows whose car it is and she says it's her son's. I tell her politely she needs to move it off my driveway, to which she says no. She says I shouldn't be able to take up 2 parking spaces and everyone else only gets 1. Is this woman serious? She's parked on our land, not on the road. Her son hears what I'm asking and suddenly comes over. He starts acting like a big hard man, saying he's not taking orders from me on where he can park. My husband is a lawyer and he told me there's actually no laws against trespassing in the UK. However, the guy is parked over the curb as he's not bothered to move my daughter's bike. I go and sit back in my car and ring the police. I ring through the non-emergency line. Police come and issue him with a fine as he was obstructing a public highway. We've now had a gate installed which we can lock. It's a pain in the backside, but I have mobility issues so need to be able to park outside my home. Edit. I've seen a lot of people say we should have got a tow truck. Again, crazy UK laws and rules meant if the car got even a scratch when we towed the car, then we would have been liable to pay for it. The next story is titled, The End of an Entitled Lady. To start this post, just know that what I did can be considered by some as a dick move. My maternal grandmother and grandfather moved out of the city to some land they owned and would vacation on to the north of us. Now they loved to have occasional family members stop over, and that included me and my siblings. One year when we were visiting and were having fun and enjoying the visit, we started to hear gunshots and then people screaming, and so we went to investigate and see if everyone was fine. When we got there, we saw my dad's brother, who also lived up there, a neighbor who owns a farm up there, both arguing with a lady who is our titular Karen, who we'll call EK. So EK was arguing with my dad's brother or DB, and the cool neighbor or CN. Well, CN caught EK on our farm trying to milk his cows to get milk from the source, as she says, and was caught by CN's dog, who chased her off, hence the gunshot. CN then confronted EK, asking her what the hell she was doing on his land when she mentioned the milk and how she doesn't like store brand, so she wanted fresh milk from the source. PB then told her she can't do that as she can get sick from that, when EK turns to DB and Dad and told them to mind their ducking business and go back to their hillbilly holes and mind their own damn business. This was the message my grandma and I came to hear when we arrived. Then after this, my dad told her that she was trespassing and it would be best if she left, and everything can be left as is. Now EK didn't like this and began to yell at and berate my dad, when my grandma stepped in and began to yell back the EK, starting a shouting contest between all of them. Now in the middle of this, I went, unnoticed, over to EK's car, which still had the door open, and looked inside. While looking, I saw she had her purse, with her phone and wallet on the seat, and an evil plan was born. I grabbed the phone and wallet and went onto the farm right by the fence where a cow had just went number 2. So, I dropped the phone and wallet into the poo. Then I grabbed a stick and stuck it in the pile and covered it. Then I went over and wiped it all around her seat, door and tires before throwing the stick off, and returned to the still occurring argument, now just happening between my grandma and EK, and I pulled her away and said, "Let's go, it'll be okay." When she looked at me, she saw I had a devious smile and knew I did something just not what. So she agreed to go home with me, and we started to leave, and as we were walking we heard EK yell, "Why is my car covered in cow shit and where's my stuff?" My gram looked at me and I simply said, "Wait until she sees where her stuff is." Yes, I know now that it was a bit much, but no one messed with my gram, and it's a memory I cherish, especially now that my gram died from a brain aneurysm. In the end, if you act like shit, don't be surprised if you get shit. The last story is entitled Jerk Wants Our Fence Cut Down. So this happened a long time ago. Also, there is no dialogue because the only interaction between my dad and the entitled neighbor happened in court. So for background, we live in France in a small town in Alsace, and we only have one house that borders ours, and what separates us is a green hedge that can get pretty high, like 2 meters, don't know how many in foots, because the house was in 2 apartment house, 1 apartment above and 1 under, and the entrance door to the apartment above has direct view in our yard and most importantly our pool, which we set up in summer. So we intentionally let the hedge grow to hide our yard as much as possible, but always cut it when it gets too big. Now onto the story. The neighbor living in the lower apartment is a bit old, never saw her so can't give any approximation, and apparently had nothing best to do than to bother us. One day my father gets a note on the door stating that our hedge is too high and she wants it cut. My father went to her and chatted and explained to her. After that first chat they settle on 1.25 m or 1.75 m, don't remember exactly. My father, my brother and I cut the fence to the agreed high, so all good, right? Wrong. After a time she asks us to bring it down to 1 meter, which would give an open view on our yard to the upper apartment. She lived in the apartment down, and threatened us with a lawsuit, and guess what? She actually dragged us to court, and guess what? She ducking won. In the courtroom my father said, and I remember that, "Okay, you know what? We are gonna tear down the hedge and build a wall." Apparently she freaked out, she didn't want a wall, but my father wouldn't budge and we just did that. My father, my older brother and I build the wall. My father first wanted to make her pay half of the build cost, but the location where we were building the wall was fully on our property, and so she didn't have to pay that half either. But this also meant she won't be allowed to paint it or hang anything on it, because yes, to this day it isn't finished, but almost, because my father had a bad injury and couldn't lift heavy things such as bricks, so we are looking toward anything she does to the wall. And just for your information, she doesn't even live in that apartment. At least not full time. Yes, you read it right, she doesn't live there but she rents that apartment to other people while she lived somewhere in the mountains. So yeah, she sued us because an hedge she doesn't even see most of the time, and short after we tear down the hedge, she build up a thing, I don't know how it's called, that blocks up 20% of light, because her sole argument was that the fence blocked too much light. Yeah. So that's pretty much it, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening.